People like us who feel deeply and care deeply about others in the world are really critical for helping create a more compassionate world. And the paradox is that those of us who are the most sensitive can often be the ones who are most likely to turn away from painful realities, because these realities can feel so overwhelming to us. So a big focus of the work I do, one of my goals, is to really invite sensitive people into conversations where we can discuss how we as sensitive people can be a part of a solution to creating a better world while staying safe in the process, while staying regulated and balanced ourselves. It is referred to as emotional dysregulation, what we're talking about now. It's basically, in simple terms, dysregulation is the state of your nervous system being out of balance, right? It's basically what happens when we're not managing, or maybe not recovering from our emotional responses in a way that feels balanced or controlled, right? So dysregulation can manifest as anger, fear, intense fear, just overwhelm, irritability, even emotional numbness. Essentially, it refers to a state of being out of our nervous system, being out of balance. Dysregulation also exists on a spectrum, right? You can be extremely dysregulated, or you can be just slightly dysregulated. So everybody knows what it feels like to be dysregulated, because we're in and out of regulation throughout the day, right? So if people are wondering what exactly is this? Sometimes, just think when you just have an emotional charge, you feel a contraction inside of you. You feel, sensitive people listening to this know exactly what I'm talking about. We feel overwhelmed, overstimulated. Here we are.
Yes.
Right. So, and there are a lot of different factors that can lead to the state of dysregulation. One thing I want to just point out, though, is that it's normal. So often, we start to get dysregulated, or we are dysregulated, or we read about dysregulation. We feel like, oh my God, something's wrong. I have to figure out how to stop this. And yes, it's important to learn how to balance your nervous system. It's important to learn how to self-regulate or regulate. And it's important to acknowledge and appreciate that we're humans, and humans get dysregulated, and sensitive humans especially get dysregulated. And we live in a profoundly, wildly dysregulating world. I think I said this to you last time that we talked. I really believe that if humanity makes it, to the future, people are going to look back and say, how did they get out of bed in the morning? How did you leave your house in this world, right? So various factors can lead to us getting dysregulated. Neurodivergence, like ADHD, autism, can impair emotional regulation. It can make it harder for people to emotionally regulate and cause dysregulation. A lot of research has shown that early psychological trauma, and it doesn't have to be trauma with a capital T, is a leading cause. Having a history where you weren't really taught how to self-regulate, and you didn't have caregivers who helped you regulate, is the main reason, at least what research suggests now, that people, or a leading reason, perhaps the leading reason, depending on what you read, that we can get so dysregulated. Mental health conditions can be dysregulating. Anxiety, depression, for example. Medications can also be, play an important role in helping us regulate. Physical states like exhaustion, can be dysregulating, and just being highly sensitive, and there's research that's really shows or suggests, I should say, that HSPs, experience emotions. We have big emotions and many sensations more deeply, which means that, we're more sensitive to stress. We're more easily overstimulated. So we're much more likely to get thrown out of balance. Our nervous system is much more likely to get thrown out of balance. I think about myself, who's highly sensitive, and my husband who's not, and we walk out the door and there's noise and lights and, God forbid, an interpersonal conflict. And I'm just completely I've got to draw on all of my regulation skills. And he's just what happened? What happened to you? So it's a very different experience. And, having said that, many sensitive people find conflict deeply dysregulating due to their high empathy, sometimes difficulty setting boundaries, and this sense of highly sensitive people, some studies have suggested, tend to be more conscientious, feeling more like an obligation, being wanting and needing to be a good person, and also more perfectionistic. We tend to, feel that it's our responsibility to cultivate and maintain harmonious relationships. And, the thought of, relational disharmony can be very dysregulating. One thing that I always say to people who are sensitive, particularly, if you notice, I can't tell you how many people have said to me that they're so frustrated with themselves because they've had some sort of an interpersonal conflict and it's like really encroaching on their day-to-day life. I can't get my work done. I can't focus. All I can do is replay this conversation in my mind. Well, you're a highly sensitive person and, and perhaps what I call a highly relational person. And what that means is that relational conflict is probably going to be highly dysregulating for you and bleed into the rest of your life. Give yourself permission to acknowledge that, prioritize like resolving that, tying up that loose end. Give yourself permission to attend to that because you're going to need to, or it's going to keep being in your mind as sort of background noise. And unfortunately, many HSPs have been, told that we're overreacting, right? And so I think, and this is anecdotal, but I really believe that one cause of, I think, the levels of dysregulation that we have among sensitive people is our tendency to not even give ourselves permission to be dysregulated and to judge ourselves like, okay, what's wrong with me? Why am I overreacting? Or, this sort of like emotional or relational perfectionism that we can get into of like, I need to be healthy and balanced. We just give yourself permission to be the hot mess that the rest of the world is. We are all hot messes. Like we've been born into incredible dysfunction. We are sensitive on top of it. We all do the best we can. And, it's our messiness is our beauty, not being perfectly relational beings. So really appreciate that dysregulation is normal, and it's also important to recognize that sometimes you're dysregulated or we're dysregulated because we're really not safe. And this is our body's nervous system telling us something needs to change. I need to find a way to exit this relational dynamic because I'm not being treated in a way that's respectful, for example.